One day before Star Wars Day, me and Dan covered a film that changed the game for comic book movies in terms of how it portrayed a more dark and brooding character. We looked at the Alex Proyas masterpiece that is The Crow. And we looked at why it's actually a Gothic romance. Now, viewer discretion is advised for this episode because we deal with some pretty heavy subjects related to the production of this movie, so bear that in mind. In a week where Lionsgate started putting out classic movies on YouTube, Georgia allowed the first cinemas to reopen with airport-style security, and the talk of the UK was the letter R for some reason. What else would you need from a film podcast and two blokes talking about arguably one of the greatest sleeper hits of all time? Hello, wherever you are listening or watching, and welcome to the Rip Ticket Review, a movie podcast that has got through its difficult second episode stage with no problems at all. My name's TheJackSmit, and joining me over the power of the internet to talk all things The Crow is the burn to my big heavy. Good afternoon, Dan Carver, and I know you've been incredibly excited to do this one.
Yeah, me too. The Crow is one of my favourite movies of all time, I think. And just to talk about it, there's just so much to talk about. I hope we can get it all done in an hour.
I know, it's going to be interesting to keep this one down to an hour. I mean, we were just talking off air. I had my first experience of this film last night at time of recording, and I enjoyed it way more than I thought I would. You've been, I mean, I've known you for a few years, and you always seem to mention The Crow at some stage. So this is going to be a good podcast. I can feel it. Yeah,
there's a huge reason. The Crow is one of those movies where I watched it and it stuck with me for the rest of my life. Because of Brandon Lee's performance. I'd obviously heard of it before, and I was like, yeah, I'll get around to watching it. And then the next time I heard about it was my mum saying, oh, it's not really that good, which is fair enough. And then I watched it. I picked it up at a car boot sale, because that was back in the days when we used to do those things. Picked it up in like car boot sale and the big box of DVDs, and I watched it, and I was blown away, and I will tell you why I was blown away in this podcast. But in order to understand the brilliance of The Crow, and I love this as well because, like you say, Jack, this is your first time watching the movie, so I get to tell you all about this, and you're going to see this movie in a completely different light at the end of this.
I've deliberately not written a review until now because
yeah. So to understand the genius and the impact that The Crow had on me and on many others as well, you have to look at the origins of The Crow. And the Crow started off as an underground comic book by a man named James O'Barr. And James O'Barr was he's an orphan. He's raised in the foster care system. He was bounced around from orphanage to orphanage, didn't really form any strong links with anyone. And he self-taught himself how to draw bodies, human bodies. And he was sort of inspired very much by the classical works of art where people study the human form, like Michelangelo's David, for example.
Right.
And you can see this in the Crow comic book, which I have a copy of in my bookcase. Saw that at my local bookstore, and I was like, yes, I'll have 10, please. But I only got the one. So he learns to draw, and some point during his life, in high school, he meets this young lady called Beverly. And this was Barr's love of his life. In the Crow extended edition, where they put all the deleted scenes, and yes, I do have that as on my DVD shelf, there's a really great interview with James O'Barr, and the way he talks about Beverly, he describes her as the person that completes him. Whenever that there was something that Barr could complain about, Beverly would point would point out the positives and sort of helped. And the two grew up together. They got into a relationship, And then, sadly, Beverly was killed by a drunk driver. It happened out of nowhere, and Barr was devastated. And he was never the same since. Even to this day, he has never been the same since. So in 1978, after Beverly's death, Barr enlists in the Marines, and he illustrates combat manuals for the military. And then in 1981, he was living in Berlin at the time, he began his work on the comic The Crow as a means of dealing with the tragedy of losing someone that he loved to such a random violent act as being killed by a drunk driver. And he was also inspired as well by an article in a Detroit newspaper he saw about a young couple being murdered over a $20 engagement ring. And in the comic, which took years to complete, because it was just James,
just the one man doing it.
He was the one-man army. He was doing the arts and the lettering and everything. And in The Crow, the protagonist Eric, his fiancée Shelley, are murdered by a gang of criminals. Eric then returns from the dead, guided by a supernatural crow to hunt the killers. Although, something that was really pointed out to me is that I don't think, and I might have to check this again, I don't think in the comic it's ever mentioned that he's risen from the dead, and that there is a theory that actually he's just completely insane. Which I thought that was rather cool, but I'll go with the risen from the dead bit, please. So, he keeps on working on The Crow. And then during this time, a young director who does music videos, he's cutting his teeth on music videos, and he's been noted for his very interesting style. He goes by the name of Alex Proyas.
Yep, a name which strikes fear into film critics nowadays. 3 words: Gods of Egypt.
Yeah, but the less we mention that, the better.
Yeah.
But before that, Alex Proyas was given the movie The Crow, and James O'Barr was heavily involved in the making of the movie. And that's pretty much how the movie came to be. Now, the movie itself had a very, very, very troubled making. And we're not just talking about the death of its star. Many things happened on that set which made people think that the movie was cursed. So, for example, a crew member driving a cherry picker was electrocuted on the very first day of shooting.
Ooh.
I know. He was driving the cherry picker to set up lights, accidentally fell into a ditch, and all of his organs were burned. He was about 26. His wife was pregnant at the time. The cherry picker went right into where the guy was lifted up. It went right into an electrical pole.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's one. A prop truck caught fire. Nobody knew why. That was the third night of shooting. A stuntman almost got killed because he was preparing for a scene, and then the stunt person fell through the rooftop set, breaking multiple ribs when he landed, and then a carpenter was electrocuted. And the 9-week filming in North Carolina was plagued by hurricanes and freezing temperatures. You've also got a disgruntled sculptor who almost destroyed the set. There was an accident with a screwdriver where one member of the art department ended up getting a screwdriver shoved through their hand one day. I mean, even Brandon Lee got injured, because there's a bit halfway in The Crow where you notice that Eric, in full Crow get-up, has black tape around his hand. Did you notice that?
I didn't notice that, actually. That's a very good spot.
You'll see that he's got black tape around his hand. It's because he cut his hand really seriously. But, of course, they needed to continue filming. And the film was constantly behind schedule as well. The shoot was never on time. It wasn't just the temperatures, or with the crew essentially being electrocuted, it seems. But there was only 8 days to finish the film when, during the time of after the accident had happened. And when I say accident, I of course mean the sad, untimely death of Brandon Lee, who was Bruce Lee's son. This was Brandon Lee's first major movie. Before then, he had acted in, I would argue, B-movie martial arts. And in fact, I think Johnny Depp was originally tipped to play the Crow, and not Brandon Lee. And then they talked to Brandon Lee. I think James O'Barr talked to Brandon Lee, or Alex Proyas did, and then they were convinced that actually, Brandon Lee should play the Crow because he's read the comic book and his take on the Crow is brilliant. It's perfect.
And on top of that, he would have been able to add a bit more to the fight choreography in the film, because he did get the credit for fight choreography.
Yep, that's correct. In fact, if you, again, watch the extended edition of The Crow, the interviews with Brandon Lee where he talks about the madness of his character, I could watch those interviews all day, every day, because they are so brilliant. And he comes up with a really poignant piece of wisdom as well about taking advantage of moments in life, because you've only got a set amount of time in the world. I won't go on about the actual details of the speech, but seriously, watch it. And it was really sad watching it as well, because he died in one of the scenes after a prop gun fired a real shell into him instead of the blank, and it was the worst thing that's happened on the set of The Crow. It is one of the worst things that's happened in Hollywood. It happened on March the 31st, 1994. What happened was the weapons master of the film was sent away for the day, and the prop master filed a .44 caliber gun with blanks without checking the barrel first. And what had happened was the gun beforehand had been used, and they, rather than use proper blanks, they had made their own dummy cartridges by removing the blasting cap from the bullet, emptying the gunpowder, and then putting the bullets back in the revolver so they could use it in close-up shots. They accidentally did not remove the gunpowder from one of the bullets. And so what happened was, when the trigger was pulled in the close-up shot, the bullet fired forward, but it got jammed in the barrel. Nobody knew that this had happened. The gun was then reused in another scene, and this time it was filled with blanks. The bullets were taken out and they were filled with blanks, but there was still that bullet that was in the barrel. So when actor Michael Massey, who played Funboy, fired at Lee from a close range, the bullet in the barrel was propelled with enough force to hit the stem of his aorta in the stomach, I do believe, one of his aortic veins. And Lee was mortally wounded. There was a series of unsuccessful blood transfusions, but ultimately, sadly, Bruce Lee passed away at 1:04 p.m. on that day, and Hollywood was completely rocked. A young man had lost his life on set. When the movie was released, this only heightened the sense of tragedy, because Lee's performance on the film was incredible, and it would no doubt propelled him to stardom. Many questions were asked. Michael Massey, the actor, never got over what had happened. He was the man that pulled the trigger. He had no idea what was happening. He had no idea what was about to happen. And even up until his death, at the age of 64, Michael Massey never got over the fact that he was the one that pulled the trigger. I think there were even talks about a murder prosecution at some point, which is ridiculous. I suppose the only good thing that came out of Brandon Lee's passing was that when it was discovered the reason as to how such a tragedy could happen, Hollywood strictly increased gun safety measures. So, for example, everything's obviously got to be checked, but on set, I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe when people are pointing guns at each other on set, they use camera angle trickery to make it look like you're pointing the gun at the actor, but in actual fact, they're pointing the gun sort of elsewhere, just over the shoulder. And that's a common trick used in acting for like props that have blanks, etc., because of this movie and the tragedy that happens. So, yeah. After which the movie was released, there was only 8 days left of filming. They had to rewrite. The producers had to rewrite some scenes and film as minimally as possible. Using Lee's stunt double, even using early CGI as well to superimpose Lee's face.
For 1994, the CGI looks really good.
Yeah. The scenes that happen, there's the scene where Brandon Lee's character, Eric, is thrown out the window. The scene where he is in the in his old apartment in the, I think it's like a bell tower or a watchtower.
Yeah, bell tower.
Bell tower. And his young ward Shelley is there, and she goes up and she's like, realizes that it's Eric who's in the makeup, and you see as the sun comes up, there's the silhouette of Eric, but you never actually see his full face. That's because it's a body double.
The rumour is that it was Chad Stahelski, the stunt double, and hot fresh science fact, Stahelski would, over 20 years later, he'd make a film called John Wick. So this film's given us some good talent. Yeah, definitely. So they managed to wrap it up, and they threw the film out there. And as you said, it was a sleeper hit, and it's attained a strong cult following as well. It was also the first installment of a franchise, which included 3 sequels and a television series. We don't talk about the sequels. No. Not in civilized conversation. We don't talk about them. They're terrible. They are absolutely bottom of the barrel terrible. I try to ignore their actual existence. One of them has Terminator 2's kid in it, doesn't it? What's his name? Who's the kid in Terminator 2? Come on, help me out, Jack. I've gone blank as well. Let's ask your old Google. Oh, mighty powerful Google. Who was the little... I was about to swear there. Who's the little kid? Where are we? G2. I'm trying to find it. That was it. Edward Furlong as one of the Crow sequels has Edward Furlong in it. Yeah. So that pretty much... I mean, his career was going nowhere at the start, and that just pretty much sealed his fate, which was, there was also a book as well written, which I've only discovered of about 5 minutes ago, and there was a television series, a Canadian television series as well. I only caught really a couple of episodes of that. It was on like the Sci-Fi channel. Yeah, it sounds like the sort of thing that go on Sci-Fi. Yeah, before it became known as Sci-Fi, Siffy. Sounds like a short, cute name for syphilis. I don't know why you people call that. But anyway, The Crow. So let's talk about the plot. Yeah. The plot of The Crow follows the plot of the comic book pretty closely, changes a few things. Now, bit of a trigger warning, probably put this in the episode description as well, maybe. Oh, there'll be a warning at the top of the episode for podcast listeners. We've got everything covered. Bit of a trigger warning for those who have joined us live. We are going to have to be talking about sexual assault, and we will be using the R word. Yeah, this is a very heavy film. It is a very heavy film, and most of the film revolves around a scene of sexual assault. In fact, that's the main character's motivation, is to avenge sexual assault and rape of his fiancée. So please do be warned. Yeah, it's an 18 certificate for very good reason. It is. So yeah, here we go. So the plot of the movie, the movie follows the comic book quite
closely, it does make a few changes from the comic. In the comic, it's just a random chance that Eric and Shelley come across these punks. They're on the roads, the car broken down. These punks are driving by, see them, kill them in a completely horrific random act of violence. Eric comes back from the dead, wastes a lot of them, and then returns back to the afterlife. In the movie, they've obviously got to change a few things because there needs to be some sort of connection between the bad guys and the good guys, other than random act of violence. But then as the movie continues on, it still follows the main plot of the comic book quite closely, which is guy comes back from the dead, goes on a massive rampage of violence, and then returns back to the afterlife. So, yeah. The plot of the movie is Brandon Lee is playing a young rock and roll star, Eric Draven, who is engaged to a young lady called Shelley. And one night when Eric returns home to his top floor a house apartment in a watchtower, he comes across a gang of criminals who are beating and raping his fiancée. Eric himself is shot, and he is then thrown out of the window, dead on impact. Shelley passes away from the injury sustained from said beating a few hours later. 1 year later, Eric is risen from the dead by a crow, and he discovers quite quickly that any damage he takes, any cuts or anything like that, they are very automatically healed. And he decides to use this newfound power to track down those who essentially killed his wife and get revenge, so that he may return back to the afterlife and see his love of his life again. Very simple plot. You could argue that it is an inverse of the rape revenge genre. Yes, there is a genre called rape revenge movies. Don't look at me like that, audience. I don't make these genres up. But you could argue it is an inverse of that genre. The rape revenge genre is normally for underground horror movies, schlocks, I like to call them, because you can't think of a decent plot, so you just break out the sexual assault. And essentially, movies like I Spit on Your Grave, that's the big one, I think, a disgusting movie, where a character gets raped and then they come back and they butcher all the attackers. And you could argue that this is an inverse of that, where actually it's not the victim of the sexual assault, but someone that they love who died during the attack coming back and, going on a mass rampage. Which, I've got a little bit of time for that argument. So the film stars Brandon Lee as Eric Draven, a young Rochelle Davis as a young girl called Sarah. She appears in the sequel as well, although, again, we don't talk about that. I'm pretty sure she doesn't either. Ernie Hudson as Sergeant Albrecht, the police officer who is initially tasked to investigate the attack and then 1 year later finds himself on the streets, demoted because he asked too many questions. One of my favourite ever actors, Michael Wincott, as the criminal boss, top dollar. And you've got all kinds of, this was like the early work for quite a few actors, Lawrence Mason, Michael Massey, Tony Todd, John Polito, David Patrick Kelly, Anna Levine, Sophia Shinus. I've got the characters bloody mixed up. Sorry, it was Shelley Webster. Sophia Shinus starred as Shelley Webster. She appeared in the sequel, not Sarah. Sorry, Sarah was the name of. Sorry, not much sleep. But
join the club.
So you have a wide array of talent there, and like I say, this is Brandon Lee's best movie by far. The movie is beautiful. I mean, Jack, you're very good at these technical details, aren't you?
Yeah.
Did you notice how beautiful the movie looked with its bleached colours?
The way this film has been shot, I know Price originally wanted to shoot this film entirely in black and white, and there's a lot of the film noir element to it. The colour palette is deliberately desaturated. Sure, the studio didn't want to let him shoot on black and white film because it would have been a little bit more expensive, a little bit more complicated to shoot. But the way this film is shot, cinematography from Dariusz Wolski, it's just perfection. Even the model shots of the city that you see splattered throughout the film, it's a technical marvel. I was sat here in awe last night watching it.
Brilliant use of bleached colours. You are right. They wanted to film the movie in black and white to honour the comic book, because the entire comic book is black and white. So they wanted to honour that. I'm glad that they didn't. I'd rather much prefer the bleached colours. I think watching it in black and white, I think there is a black and white version on the extended edition, but I have watched black and white. I've just messed around with the
saturation settings,
and honestly, it bleaches out way too much of the detail. I think that would have. I think, although Eric Draven looks brilliant in it, don't get me wrong. But
they got the character right.
But you are right. The shots of the city look incredible. It's a city rotten to the core, where the police are powerless to stop this criminal gang, and Eric, there's this wonderful scene where Eric is playing the guitar on top of a building, and it's sort of shot throughout the city, isn't it? And it's so beautiful. The performances are top notch. Not a performance in this movie which is wasted. Everyone does the best that they can with this movie. I love Michael Wincott as well. He's named as Top Dollar, which is his name in the comic, but I don't think he's actually filmed. Michael Wincott in this movie, he is second place to Brandon Lee's best performance in this game in this movie. His cool, collected villain. There's never a moment where Top Dollar screams in rage. He's always so cool and collected. He's such a scumbag. I love it. You've also got a brilliant performance by Michael Massey as well as Funboy, the drugged up maniac. There's a very memorable scene where Eric Draven goes after Funboy, and Funboy shoots him point blank in the hand, and as he's jumping around going, he shoots, he scores, he watches as the bullet hole heals up in front of him. Such a wonderful performance. And there was actually an extended fight scene as well. There was a deleted scene where after I do believe it's when he goes into the bathroom and he chases away Shelley's mum, and he says, look, go away, be there with your daughter. Funboy comes up with a razor and starts slashing at the Crow, at Eric Draven. But the scene was, you watch the scene, it's like, it's a great scene, but it's unneeded. But it was still a good scene. And I do believe that's where also Brandon Lee cut himself. Because on the shaving razor. It was one of those old school razors that they use. But I've been dancing around this long enough. It's time to
actually sing the praises of this thing.
Oh, it's time to sing the praises of Brandon Lee. One of the great tragedies of his passing of this movie is that he never got to see how his performance was received. It was critically acclaimed.
Oh, yes.
Everyone can agree that this is his best performance ever. There is so many layers to Eric Draven as a character. Brandon Lee, in the interview, points out that if you were brought back from the dead to avenge someone that you really loved, you would be a little bit insane. And you would be very sad. And you can definitely see it in Eric Draven. There are moments when Eric is completely depressed as he's talking about his now dead fiance. There are moments of seething rage as he's holding one of the gang members at knife point. There are just there's so many layers to this performance. It's like I say, it's one I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost ethereal in a sense. His performance, makes this movie. Without Brandon Lee, this movie would never have happened. It would have just gone under the radar.
Yeah.
But with Brandon Lee, he elevates this from your average superhero movie, because it is a superhero adaptation.
Yeah.
It's been classified as a superhero adaptation, which surprised me somewhat, because I wouldn't call The Crow a superhero. But I can kind of see the reasons why. But it elevates this from just an ordinary superhero adaptation of the 90s to something that we're still talked about to this very day. And yes, The Crow, with his iconic face makeup, is responsible for many, many people dressing up as The Crow in comic book in nightclubs on Halloween in hopes of looking really cool and sullen.
There was even a wrestler who used the makeup. Used the makeup.
Yeah. And it's responsible for all these guys dressing up as The Crow in hopes of finding a girl for the night, in hopes that he looks cool and mysterious. If you're one of these people, go home, go away, get a personality. It works. Stop doing that. It's one of my favorite lines, actually. From South Park, because this was referenced in South Park as well, in Satan's Sweet 16, it was called, where Satan decides to hold a Sweet 16 birthday party, and he bans the Crow for that very reason. And I was laughing so hard, I was crying, damn straight, because I was like, yes, somebody else feels the same way as me. Oh, go watch the clip. I don't have the clip. I was meant to download it, but I forgot. But go watch the clip. Satan's Sweet 16 for The Crow.
Oh, we shall try and track it down and stick it in for our podcast listeners.
That episode gained notoriety because it had was it Steve Irwin, the Crocodile Hunter?
Yeah.
A couple of days after he died, the episode aired, and it was Steve Irwin in hell. Ooh. And he comes up and at the party, and Satan's like, dudes, there's a great costume and all, but Steve Irwin's like not been dead for too long, bit of bad taste. I'm not in costume, it really is me, it is Steve Irwin. And he goes, really? Well, you're not in costume, dude, you got to get out. That got a lot of negative reaction because it was too soon after it. Even I thought, I was like, bit on the nose there, a bit too soon. But, I love the Crow reference. Anyway, so, just over half an hour left. The title of the show is The Crow is a Gothic romantic movie. I do believe that there is a very strong argument to make that The Crow is a Gothic romance. More so than it is a superhero movie. And I think that it is criminally underrated that has flown under the radar of quite a lot of people. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. If I'm wrong, feel free to contact us and let me know why. But I believe that The Crow is most certainly, if not in whole, as a part, a Gothic romance / action / superhero adaptation. It's a hell of a title. So why do I think that? Well, let's have a look at Gothic romance novels in the late 18th and 19th century. Gothic romances were often mysteries, and they often involved the supernatural, and they were heavily tinged with horror, and they were set against dark backgrounds of medieval ruins and haunted castles. Now, it's no mystery who essentially murdered Eric Draven and Sarah. There's no mystery. It's made very clear. But there is a mystery in how the Crow finds these people, and he's trying as he's plotting out his revenge, and he's trying to figure out what the best. He's trying to figure out where they are essentially. Okay, that's a bit of a weak connection, I'll admit. But there is no denying that there is supernatural elements in this. There were originally horror elements in the form of a character called the Skull Cowboy, which was cut from the film. In the comic, the Skull Cowboy serves as a means to remind Eric of his mission and the pain that he goes through. He's called the Skull Cowboy because he is a skeleton that wears a cowboy hat. This was originally in the movie. There are deleted scenes that you can find in the extended version where they had filmed all the Skull Cowboys bits, but they were all cut out when eventually they realized, actually, we can take out this whole character and the movie will be absolutely fine. So there are horror elements. There is a monster that essentially guides the Crow in the movie called the Skull Cowboy. His job is to essentially make sure that Eric stays on his mission, and he gives him little mission tidbits. And he is responsible for a major turning event in the movie, which I won't spoil. But again, they cut it out, so, oh well. So there are supernatural elements. Also, as well, the setting of the film, again, when you have a look at Gothic horrors, they're often set against dark backgrounds of medieval ruins and haunted castles. And all right, so we're not in a medieval ruins, but the complete city that they are in for the whole movie is a complete ruin. What do you think in regards, Jack?
Yeah, I can sort of see what you mean by the whole city being a ruin thing. I got some points with some of the model shots. I got serious Blade Runner vibes because it's this dystopian landscape that you see all punked down, cyberpunk-esque at points, dare I say.
Well, it makes a lot of sense considering that Proyas then went on to direct Dark City.
Yeah.
Which is the best movie. But yeah, you are right. There are sort of like these dark dystopian elements to these shots. The bleached colours. The only colour and life that is in this city is in the movie right towards the end, where Eric watches a group of kids running in Halloween costumes, and I think that's the only life that's ever shown in this city. Everything else, when you watch the movie, you just see that the city is just slowly rotting from the inside. So we've got the setting, but also as well, the romantic side of things as well. It sort of comes into play here. Eric is on a mission of vengeance. He is looking to avenge the death of his fiancée and her brutal murder, torture, and rape. But his part in the event, where he's thrown out of a window, is very rarely mentioned in his motives. He is so distraught that the love of his life was taken. He ignores all the things that happened to him, and he focuses on his love of his life. He focuses on the pain that she felt, and that is his main motivation. I mean, how many times you've watched the movie yourself yesterday? How many times did he mention as a motive that him being thrown out of the window was a reason why he was going on the murderous rampage?
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember now because I've not had enough Earl Greys today. It's just dawned on me.
Okay, running low. Please refill.
Yeah, I'll probably top up after this. He's very clear about what he wants to do, but he doesn't get on too much to his victims. He's like, I'm just here to avenge. He's just on his own, doing what he has to do.
Yeah. He is essentially fueled by his love for his fiancée that has transcended death and has fueled his, he has fueled his resurrection, because it even says in the opening soliloquy, it says that sometimes when a soul is so sad from, its passing away, it doesn't find peace. Sometimes the soul is brought back, and that's where the crow comes in. The crow is in the bird, the crow, and resurrects Eric, because Eric is so sad. Eric doesn't, he accepts that he has passed on, but he uses, his love for his fiancée Sarah, and the rage that he feels, the injustice that his attackers have managed to get away, and he uses that as a motive to essentially bring Sarah, and by extension himself, Sarah's death, some sort of what's the word? Some closure.
Yeah.
That actually, whilst this has happened, at least the perpetrators have been punished. And in a sense, it's kind of telling, in a sense, of how much Eric Draven loves Sarah. He loves her so much. He is willing to transcend death. He is willing to take bullets. He is willing to take stab wounds and all kinds of punishment, because the crow takes a massive battering throughout this whole movie.
Oh, yeah.
He is willing to do that to right a huge injustice that was placed upon his love. How many people can say that they love their partner that much? They love their partner that much that they would transcend death to come back and avenge them. That's a very Gothic way, isn't it, of saying I love you. I wouldn't recommend writing that on a Valentine's card, by the way.
No, thank God Valentine's is over for another year. Just don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, that's a very weird Valentine. Do you know what? There's probably some Valentine's cards out there, actually. So, but yeah. So there's that. I honestly think that The Crow is a Gothic romance movie for those reasons. Because everything revolves around Sarah. It would make more sense for Sarah to come back alive and avenge her death, but it's crazy. I love it. I love it so much.
On top of that, I'm gonna have to mention it. One of the scenes that really captivated me last night was when we see Eric Draven put the makeup on for the first time, and you have the almighty Burn by The Cure blaring out.
The soundtrack to this is amazing. The soundtrack is absolutely amazing.
When the cinemas reopen, I'm going to make a point of asking the general manager of the local here in Preston to try and get this film back on a big screen, because it needs to be seen on the biggest possible screen.
You know what? I'm about to make an absolute prat of myself now, because I've had my notes open all this time, and I always bloody do this. There's a running joke between me and my mates when I watch this. I always get two main characters mixed up. And I've been doing it the whole episode. And I'm such a prat for doing it. And
I always get fine. We're live.
And we're live as well. And there are people watching. I always get the characters Sarah and Shelley mixed up in names. Eric Draven's murdered fiancée is Shelley. Sarah is the little girl that is Eric Draven's ward. Oh my! There's people that will be listening to this just going. And he's live on the internet. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Can you edit that?
We'll try our best to edit round. I mean, a 2-hour turnaround time for the podcast, so we'll see what we can do.
What we're going to do, audience, is we're going to edit everything in this so that I actually don't make that mistake.
Well, see what I can do before 6 o'clock.
Yeah. No, Shelley is the fiancée who gets murdered, and Sarah is the young girl who yeah, we don't talk. We have talked about Sarah the character quite a bit actually, but he's essentially is essentially Eric Draven's Link in the world, and she appears in the sequel, but we don't talk about that.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
And there's a really sweet moment where Eric gives a gift to. Double check this now. Gives a gift to Sarah, which belongs to Shelley. Further cementing that everything about Eric and his mission, there's nothing about him. It is all about the love he feels for his, murdered fiance. So that's pretty much my argument for the Crow. I can't believe I made that mistake. I absolutely am.
Well, if anything, we might have begun a nice little rip ticket running joke.
God no. But yeah, I've just got the Crow now out of my DVD case. It's the extended. It's the 2-disc collector's edition. I'm looking at it right now. I'm sure. Oh dear, I must have misplaced them. There were a couple of cards in here. I think they have Brandon Lee, the picture on them, but they seem to have not. Oh, that's a shame. I seem to have put them. I don't know. I seem to have put them somewhere else. But yeah, the 2-disc collection of The Crow. The second disc, of course, has Brandon Lee's last on-screen interview, where he talks about how little time we have left on this planet, essentially, as individuals, and how it's important to make every moment count. The Sun said tremendous. Lee is excellent. Understatement. Lee is phenomenal in this movie. I love this movie very much. It's one of my favorites. I won't lie and I'll say yes, it is part of the reason why I had, during my young adult years, I had a bit of a goth phase going on. And it was mostly inspired by this movie. The soundtrack is phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
9 Inch Nails, who routinely produce brilliant gothic sort of industrial tunes, and they are right at home here in The Crow.
Right, I've got the list of the soundtrack here. Tracks from The Cure, The Jesus and Mary Chain, Rage Against the Machine, and Helmet, alongside covers of Joy Division songs.
Oh, I thought it was 9 Inch Nails. There you go. See, another mistake I've made.
And the 9 Inch Nails were involved. I did see.
I was right. Yeah, I was certain. Dead Souls.
Yeah, that's the cover. Yeah, they covered the Joy Division
when
song.
You were mentioning all those bands, I was like, hang on a minute, where's 9 Inch Nails in that list? I think they made something. There was definitely the Cure were definitely involved.
Yeah, Burn is the song from the film.
The song Dead Souls. Which was played when Eric Draven, goes back to his home, smashes the window, and puts on the facial makeup. And it's a great song. Listen to it. So what did you think of the movie then, Jake? It was your first time watching it
First time watching it last night. I can see where a lot of the more modern films got a lot of their ideas in terms of character execution from. The way it was directed for a 1 hour 40 film, to have it all wrapped up in such a short time span, you don't really get many films like that nowadays. It's straight to the point, it's brutal, it's visceral. Some of the fight sequences, I mean, we've mentioned Brandon Lee's talent as a choreographer. Some of the fight scenes are up there in, I say, some of the best I've seen in many, many years. This film has got a lot of good qualities going for it, and quite rightly, it's become a cult hit. It's coming up on 26 years. May 13th, 1994 was when it came out in America, so it's coming up on the anniversary, so we really couldn't be doing this podcast at a better time. Yeah. This is a film that has, for a lot of people, gone under the radar, and I can honestly say, I don't want to spoil too much because there will be a full written review going up on TheJackSmit.com later tonight after I've got all this podcast sorted. This is a film that I cannot recommend enough. It's a film that should be tracked down, watched. It's not like we've all got a bit of time on our hands right now. It's a film that has to be seen properly to get the full experience. It's
watched with the lights out.
Yeah, I watched it with the lights out in full 5.1 surround sound last night as well, because I've got a full setup.
There you go. Watch it with the lights out, with the full, if you can, with the surround sound, but definitely watch it with the lights out.
Oh, yeah.
I suppose. I suppose we have to. I suppose we have to talk about the sequels very briefly and why you should
sequels
not watch.
and the proposed but never actually happened remake, because they were going to remake it.
For the love of God, people, in the last 5 minutes, I'm watching people that have joined, and it's fantastic that so many of my friends have joined. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining and watching. I hope I haven't made a mess of too much in my mistake. But there were, I do believe, 2 or 3 sequels released of the movie, and they suck.
Yep. So the first one was 1996, The Crow, City of Angels.
That one sucked, but it could have sucked a whole lot less. And then they made the 1998 Canadian television series Stairway to Heaven, which, from the episodes I saw, it was okay. And then it got really, really bad with The Crow Salvation, with Kirsten Dunst starring as well. And it was loosely based on The Lazarus Heart, which was the novel of The Crow, which I did not realise existed.
Oh, and after its distributor cancelled the intended release because of City of Angels' negative critical reception, Crow Salvation was straight to video. That tells you everything.
Now, it was received with mixed reviews. I do have mixed feelings to it. Sometimes I want to set it on fire. Other times I want to throw it out of the window. My feelings are very mixed on its demise. The next sequel was Wicked Prayer. That is the bottom of the barrel, and that was the worst of them all. As far as I'm concerned, Wicked Prayer was no. I watched a video review on it years ago. I got about 1/4 of the way through the movie, and then I was like, nope. It stars Edward Furlong, David Boreanaz, and Tara Reid. With a cast like that, it's going to be great. And Dennis Hopper as well, and Danny Trejo. It was inspired by another novel, and it's just awful. And look, part of the reason why these movies are terrible, but The Crow original is brilliant, is because that James O'Barr worked very, very closely with the Alex Proyas in The Crow. He has a cameo. Go back and watch the movie. There's a scene, in the scene where Eric is talking to Officer Albrecht in the streets, you see a man stealing a TV. That man is James O'Barr.
Hey!
That was his credit in the film. So go back and watch it, Jack, and have fun with that. But James O'Barr was very, very heavily involved in the film. He got on very well with Brandon Lee. I mean, who didn't? Brandon Lee was amazing. Brandon Lee was the Keanu Reeves of the time.
Yeah.
Which should tell you everything. In fact, Brandon Lee was originally tipped to play Neo, I do believe.
Oh.
In the Wakatoshis, I can't pronounce the name.
Which Annabelle,
please, Carol. Those directors, the Wakatoshi sisters, The Matrix. It was originally meant to be Brandon Lee. That's who they were thinking of. But then, of course, circumstances transpired, and it went Keanu Reeves. But yeah, James O'Barr worked very closely with the direction, and you could really tell there was this sense of James O'Barr's, feelings and tragedy injected into this movie, amplified by Brandon Lee. That's what makes the movie great. There's none of this in the sequels, none of this in the TV show, at all. Okay, as far as I'm aware, and I have not seen anything to counteract this, James O'Barr had absolutely nothing to do with Salvation or Wicked Prayer. And there was a planned sequel called The Crow 2037, scheduled and directed, which was written and was going to be directed by Rob Zombie in the late 1990s, but it was never made. Thank God. And yes, there is a reboot. Don't reboot it, please.
That reboot, as of May 31st, 2018, Doesn't have a director, doesn't have a star. Jason Momoa was attached to it at one point before Aquaman became a big success that arguably saved DC from more awful superhero films.
Well, kept him above water, then Shazam
And then
kind of. Yeah.
I know Shazam's turned a profit, so Warner are happy.
Leave it alone. Leave The Crow alone. If you look at The Crow as a singular movie, as a singular product, you will. It is one of the greatest movies that you will ever see. If you treat it as a bit of as a franchise, I believe it loses it completely. It loses, what's great about it. It is not the whole point of The Crow. What makes it amazing is that it is a singular story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It does not need a franchise. It does not need the superhero DC treatment. Leave it alone. Don't reboot it. Don't remake it. Just leave it as it is.
And the Rotten Tomatoes rating says it all. 82% for the original film.
82%.
82%, audience score of 90%. So that tells you how critically acclaimed this movie was.
Yep. Please do watch it. Watch it in a dark room. Enjoy it. I hope that this film, really touches you and hits you in the feels as it does to me every time I watch it. I highly advise people to go and watch the interviews. This is one of the very few films where I would highly advise people to dive straight in with the making, the direction, the interviews. It's a fascinating story. Please watch it. Please enjoy it. I'm not saying don't dress up as the Crow for Halloween, but don't dress up as the Crow for Halloween to look dark and mysterious in the hopes that you get laid. That's not what I want from this movie. Just enjoy the movie. And, I'll be watching this on the anniversary of the movie. I might actually watch it after this, to be honest. But I'm watching it on the anniversary of the movie. It is Brandon Lee's finest performance ever. And it is perhaps one of the finest performances by a leading actor in my lifetime that I have seen.
It's a proper Heath Ledger Joker-style moment for him.
Yes. When Heath Ledger passed away and I saw the Joker, my first thought was, this is so sad. It's similar to the story of Brandon Lee. The greatest performance ever. And sadly, he'll never see it. He'll never see how it's touched a whole culture. He'll never see how... people like myself, it essentially helped me, in a sense, in a dark time. He'll never see that, and it's a tragedy. But like I say, watch the movie, enjoy the movie. If you've already watched it, watch it again. One of the best movies ever, Brandon Lee's finest. It's a gothic romance movie. It's a superhero movie. It's brilliant. The end.
Feels good to talk about a good movie on this podcast for the first time after doing The Room, which was so bad it's good, and then
it's a great movie.
I know, so bad it's good.
Yeah.
And then talking about Uwe last week.
Both movies are fantastic. It was good to talk about a good movie that is good for the right reasons.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, it was pretty good. Next week. Right. Next week, we talk about one of my favourite people to talk about ever, the legendary Frank Dukes. Expect lots of bizarre details and plenty of disclaimers because apparently Dukes is a bit litigious heavy in suing people. He's kind of like the Kanye West of martial arts now. He'll sue anyone that says a bad name about him. But we'll be talking about Frank Dukes and his involvement in the legendary Jean-Claude Van Damme movie Kickboxer.
Oh.
Not Kickboxer. No, I've done it again. I have to have a look at this now. Well, I think he did help. He did help out in Kickboxer, but he also did. Let's have a quick Bloodsport. That was it.
Oh yes.
Bloodsport. That is the most Van Damme of all Van Damme movies. Ask me how good that movie is. Go on, Jack.
How good is Bloodsport?
It's Van Damme good.
That's the joke I'm using for the title.
It's Van Damme good, and we will be talking about why it's Van Damme good, and we'll also be talking about the legendary Frank Dukes. So,
You've got that to look forward to next Sunday from 3 p.m. live here on Facebook. For our podcast listeners, if you enjoyed this, 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts would be greatly appreciated. To get this podcast out to more listeners, I can exclusively reveal, I've had the first stats through from the podcast host. This is a bit of a banter. We've had 69 plays. Nice.
69, dude!
Yep. If you enjoyed the Rip Ticket review, we're live on Facebook every Sunday from 3 p.m. UK time. It'll be out, and then it goes out as a podcast at 6 p.m. It's a rapid turnaround because we've got good at that. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get all your audio from, basically. As we said, we'll be back next week with Bloodsport and Frank Dukes and the whole world of Van Damme. In TheJackSmit.com terms, full written review of The Crow will be up later tonight, alongside tomorrow, brand new episode of The Journal to look forward to. So that's all the plugs for my content done. This has been the Rip Ticket review. My name's been Jack Smit.
My name's been Dan Carver.
Until next week, we will see you at the movies. Take it easy, everyone.
Bye.